Hey, everybody, it's Holly Broughton with the Sane-ish podcast, and we are on our fifth episode, and glad to have everybody back. Today, we have a special guest. He is a personal friend of mine, and I'm so happy that he has said yes. He does a lot of service work, and he's come through for me many times, and I'm so grateful that he's here and he's going to talk with us, because my hope is that he is an inspiration to a lot of young people. I know he already has been, but as far as this podcast is concerned, I hope that his message gets out to a lot of young people, because I do know that a lot of young people face a lot of um, you know a lot of pressure with drugs and alcohol in recovery, as far as staying in recovery, and it's difficult. But a lot of times they don't realize what an impact they make on other young people when they do stay in recovery. So that's kind of what this podcast is going to be about. And I think, and I hope that that's where we go with this. But I know that Brandon is a good example of that. So anyway, so welcome, Brandon. Glad to
Hi,
have
Holly.
you.
Thank you for having me and thank you for asking me.
Oh, you're welcome. So listen, why don't you share your story? It just start off with your little inception of how you got to this world, and tell us your story.
All right. So, you know, I always like to start with this. This is absolutely my favorite part of the big book. Um, and it's chapter 11 of Vision for You. And it says for most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. But not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It is thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion and awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. And that was most definitely me, even from the day I was born. I was born into a alcoholic family and a drug addicted family. My dad was an alcoholic. My mother was an addict. And they separated when I was very young. My dad had came back from a deployment in Korea, and my father's name is Mark, and I was calling him Jim. So right out of the gate, my mother put that blame on me, and ever since then, anything and everything that went wrong in my life or with our family, my mom blamed me. Um, to this very present day, my father was a lifelong alcoholic. He is 63 years old now. He is in a assisted living facility. He has had three strokes and two heart attacks and is in a wheelchair because of this disease. You know, it has absolutely no bounds. My mother was still is a lifelong alcoholic and addict. Um, so that had a very, very big impact on my childhood. My childhood was not, it was not spectacular by far. Um, my, I don't like spending too much time in my past or my drunk log because, as it says right there in what I just read, we all face those four horsemen, terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair, and we all know what that's like, we all get there one way or another. So I believe that once you heard one story, you heard a lot of them, right? There might be some minor differences, but it's all fundamentally the same thing. So I'll just give you a couple of, highlighted parts. When when I was in the second grade, me and my sister went to school, and we just thought it was going to be a normal day. And we came back home, and our duplex was completely empty. The only thing that was left in the duplex was the stuff that was in our room and a green bathrobe that my mother had worn all the time. And that was the first time that she abandoned me and my sister, the first time. And it took my dad about a week, maybe a week and a half, to come and get me and my sister. And that year, the following year and a half in my life was absolutely the most wretched and horrible year that I can remember. I was in the third grade and living with my alcoholic father. There was a lot of violence in the home, a lot of alcohol, a lot of domestic violence, abuse, neglect. The list, I can talk about it for forever. In the third grade, this was as I went back into my drinking history, you know, ever since I was a little kid, since kindergarten, I displayed alcoholic behavior without the alcohol, right? I was diagnosed ADHD, severe ADHD in kindergarten, and I was put on every medication under the sun for it. You name it, I've probably been on it, Uh, Today I'm not medicated, and that's truly a miracle, right? Um, you know, I was expelled for the first time in the third grade. I brought a weapon to school and I pulled it out on a kid, and schools don't take kindly to that. So I was expelled for the first time, and I was not allowed back in any school throughout the entire state of Colorado. Um, Eventually, my mom came to pick me up to move to Omaha, Nebraska, and I stayed in Nebraska throughout my whole entire youth until I graduated high school.
Where were
You
you
know,
before? Where were you before, Brandon? What
oh,
state?
Colorado Springs.
Oh, okay.
So I was born. Yep, I was born on Fort Carson, and I lived in Colorado Springs. And when my mom came to pick me up, that's when I moved out to Omaha, and that's where I stayed until I graduated high school. So after I moved out there, I thought everything was going to be okay-ish. It just turns out that I went from one violent home to another. My mother was very, very abusive physically, mentally, and emotionally. And a lot of the things that have happened throughout my childhood and into my teen years, especially the mental and the verbal abuse, these were things that were instilled into me, and at one point I believed them. And that's where the real damage was done, so some of these things, I'm still actively dealing with through trauma counseling, and that healing process is an absolute beautiful thing, right? So we move out to Omaha, and in the seventh grade, I got caught smoking pot at school by my soccer coach in the locker room. So go figure, right? I would always steal my mom's pot and blame it on my sister and, listen to her get her ass whipped. And I thought it was funny at the time, but when I look back at it, that was pretty messed up to do. So I got expelled. I had to go to court. I got put on probation and enter Alcoholics Anonymous. I was court ordered to go to AA in the seventh grade. So my mom had to write down the Lord's Prayer for me because they said it at the end. And I didn't know what they were talking about in these meetings, but I do remember, these people were in there and they were talking about not drinking, or using any kind of other substance. So that seed was planted at a very, very young age, right? I was in the seventh grade. On the other side of that, I was totally down to go to these meetings, sit in this hot box smoky room with all these old people. I can drink coffee and they would just give me cigarettes. This was back when you can smoke in meetings. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. So I would get my little yellow paper sign to give to my probation officer, and yeah, from the time I got put on probation in the seventh grade, I stayed on probation until I turned 18 years old. So it was my whole juvenile life. I was involved with the court system in one way or another. It didn't matter what it was, right? Um, Later on in that year, um, it was right before my birthday in November. I'm sitting in my social studies class, and the school security guard and two Sarpy County sheriffs come into the classroom and they ask for me by name. And I thought I was in trouble. I thought I had done something wrong or something, right? So they told me I needed to go with them, and they took me down to the office. Well, when I saw the front doors of the school, I ran out of the room. I ran out of the school, and I ran for about a mile and a half, right? At this point, I was running cross country. I was a star soccer player. I played baseball for a couple of seasons, but you know, just as it says in the big book, alcoholics often live double lives, right? I would go run cross country. I would play these soccer games, and then I would go home and I would smoke all this pot, or I would get into whatever alcohol was at home, right? I would be one person at school and then a completely different person outside, right? So yeah, alcoholic behavior before I was an alcoholic, well, before I admitted I was an alcoholic, right? So they come to get me out of my classroom, and they bring me back to the school after they catch me, and my sister is sitting in the school office. Um, and I look at her and I say, "What's going on? What did we do?" And she just looks at me and says, "We're not going to live with mom anymore. She doesn't want us."
Oh,
And enter me and my sister going into foster care. So from that moment forward, at that moment, this was the second time my mom abandoned me and my sister. She called the state of Nebraska and told them that she can no longer take care of this mentally, emotionally, financially, the whole works, and to come and get us. Me and my sister were supposed to stay together when we went into foster care, and that did not happen. I wound up on one side of the city of Omaha, and she wound up on another side. Um,
How,
so
how
my
did that, how did that, like, how did that make you feel? Like, I mean, I can't even imagine. Like,
You know, it made me feel that I did something wrong, that I was to blame, like this is my fault. You know, I thought to myself, if I wouldn't have got expelled, if my mom wouldn't have had to come and pick me up from my dad's house, you know, just if I would have been a good boy or that good son, you know, my family wouldn't be put in this position, right? You know, so you know, there were a lot of things that were going on in my house when I was living with my mom. There was meth being cooked down in our basement by a couple of individuals. There were some incredibly dangerous people coming in and out of our home. One of these guys that showed up at our house, I called him Cowboy Tom. He lived in his black van in our driveway for a couple of weeks, and he wound up getting into a high-speed chase with the Omaha Police Department. And he made it over into Council Bluffs, Iowa, and he was shot and killed by the police. And there were massive amounts of methamphetamine that was found in his van that came out of my mom's basement.
wow.
So, you know, my childhood was not great with my parents, you know. So I go into foster care and my time in foster care was absolutely atrocious. You know, they classified me as a problem child. So what that means is every state does it. The more issues that a child has, the more money a foster parent gets paid, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, to keep me in his house, my foster dad was giving my caseworker kickbacks, which means he was paying her for her to keep me in my house instead of removing me. The foster brothers that I had living in that house were not great. I can tell you stories for days and days and days of the things that we did, but that would take up way too much time. You know,
Mhm.
some key points. There was a lot of alcohol. My foster dad, Richard, he would buy his cigarettes, he would buy his alcohol. He knew that we smoked pot, you know, smoked weed, whatever. And quite honestly, he didn't care. Uh, one of my foster brothers, you know, I can openly say this now. I put in a lot of work behind that. You know, I was raped by one of my foster brothers. You know, it was not a pretty experience. One of my Another foster brother, Steven, he was a hemophiliac, and I can't tell you how many times we had drank together, and he got alcohol poisoning. And one time in particular, he wound up in the ER and the ICU, and he flatlined a couple of times one night. You know, he almost died. You know, because of this, and still to this day, he is not doing too great. You know, but I do remember very, very vividly though. And once again, this comes back, you know, to doing the steps and looking back into the past. And, you know, I remember very vividly, I was just about to turn 15, and I took my weed pipe and I took my little bottle that I had and I went outside in front of my foster house and I threw them both down the street and I said, I don't ever want you in my life again. And, you know, I'm better off and all this stuff. Right. And it is the first time that I truly meant it, that I was going to swear it off. And the very next day I was getting high and getting drunk. Okay.
Mhm.
So, you know, and it mentions that in the big book too, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, I was eventually removed from this foster house and I went to a group home. You know, after I went into this group home, I was in drug court. I completed my drug court, and the night that I graduated drug court, my one of my friends went to the liquor store, stole a bottle, and we drank and did lines of cocaine on my little plaque that I got from graduating drug court that took me 2.5 years to get out of, right? So the very first night, very first night. So um by the time my run was up when I was a teenager, the state of Nebraska had enough of me. I was 2.5 years behind in high school. Which means I was a third year freshman. I repeated my freshman year 3 times. So they sent me out to my last group home. It was called Heartland, and it was in Geneva, Nebraska. So you look northeast, south, and west, and all you see is cornfields for miles and miles and miles. So if you wanted to run away, which I was notorious for doing, you were going to run for a very long time, right?
Mhm.
So I finally buckled down, and all the schoolwork that we got came from Fillmore Central High School in Geneva. So I finally buckled down, and I wound up graduating an entire semester ahead of my class. My graduating year was 2008. I graduated in December of 2007 with extra credits that I could apply towards college, right? So after I graduated high school, the state of Nebraska, they couldn't hold on to me anymore, right? I mean, they could, but in their eyes, they said, what's the point, right? So in the state of Nebraska, the legal age is 19. It's not 18.
Mhm.
So I was 18 when I graduated. Uh, they drove me from Geneva, Nebraska, back to Omaha and put me on a Greyhound bus and said, "Have a nice life, kid." And they sent me back out to Colorado Springs to live with my mom. And oh boy, this was when things got incredibly hectic, crazy, unmanageable, and just that total depth diving into addiction and alcoholism and substance use, right? Um, the
Did
moment
you
that I
want,
got,
did you want to live with your mom? Was it a choice? I mean,
I yes and
she,
no.
she,
I didn't
because
I didn't want
she
to live.
gave you up.
So I didn't want to live with her, and given the track record, even still to this day, I don't have a relationship with my mother.
Mhm.
Um, my during this time, I was living with my mom. I lived with her for maybe 5 months, 4 months, 5 months, somewhere around in there, and she wound up kicking me out
Oh,
on
okay.
a cold night. It was a blizzard, and I had absolutely nowhere to go. This was the umpteenth time,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna go back a little bit. So from the whole entire time that I was living with my dad, even through our whole entire time in foster care, in and out of group homes, youth detention centers, I did not receive one phone call from my mother. I never received one letter, one phone call, no birthday present, nothing. It was just absolute radio silence. Same thing with my dad, right? And
Mhm.
I can pinpoint very key points in my life where I knew certain things happened. And I can thank the program for that. I can thank AA for that and working the steps. And I had to seek outside sources. I had to go to therapy, therapy.
Mhm.
Now, it does say in our big book, seek out that professional help, right?
Mhm.
Well, what the program gave to me was it gave me not only the courage and the strength to do it, but being coming in and out of the program for years and years and years. And what it did was it broke the ice enough for me to confront all of these things that have happened in a therapy environment, right? So the therapy that I do is IFS, internal family systems, right? And I'm a huge advocate for it. Um, so after I lived with my mom, she kicked me out. I got married to this young girl. Her name was Randy, and I'm gonna fast forward through a lot of this, right? So I married and divorced the same woman 3 times. You know, yeah, you can go ahead and laugh. I've only met one other person that has me beat. He married and divorced the same woman 4 times, and I thought I had issues,
Hey,
so
no judgment here. I think we all have relationship issues in the program, so no judgment here. So just saying.
right, right. And when when I look back at everything, like I said, I always had alcoholic behavior, and when I turned 18, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't under the microscope of absolutely anything or anybody. I didn't have any probation officers. I didn't have a caseworker. I didn't have the state of Nebraska hanging over my head. So I had zero life skills, zero clue what to do, nothing. So I just went and it was off to the races. For well over a decade, you know, all throughout my 20s, it was just absolutely progressive. It started off with, oh, well, I'm only going to drink, on the weekends, and that very, very, very rapidly evolved into daily drinking. By the time my 21st birthday, how quick I did this, by my 21st birthday, nobody wanted to be around me. Everybody knew what I was about. I spent it by myself at a bar up the street from my house, and I don't remember much. I do remember walking home very vaguely, and I remember opening the door and falling on the floor and passing out. You know, um, ever since that point, I was a hard alcohol drinker. Ever since that point, it was just either a blackout or I'm gonna drink until I pass out, and when I come to, I'm gonna start doing it again. And I never drank beer because I thought, I had to drink too much of it to get drunk to get the effect that I liked. Because I'm an alcoholic, I like to drink because of the effect that it produces, right? And I have drank some gnarly stuff. My brother-in-law got a bottle of tequila one time from Mexico, and it was tobacco flavored, and it tasted like somebody had put an ashtray outside and it rained in the ashtray, and I drank the water out of that ashtray. That's what it tasted like. I took one sip of it and said, "This is the most disgusting thing I ever had," but yet the whole entire bottle disappeared. Right?
Yep, sounds about right.
Yeah. Yep. So, and my substance use really didn't kick in until I was really, really heavy into drinking. I turned to other things such as cocaine, methamphetamine, Adderall, because you know, in my mind, my philosophy was I can't be hungover if I'm drunk, and if I don't go to sleep, I can drink more, right? You know,
So
I
you
was
got
able
into that
to,
vicious cycle. You got into that
yeah.
vicious, yeah.
Oh
Uh,
yes, absolutely. You know, towards towards the middle of it, I was 25 or 26, somewhere around in there. Uh, I was I was divorcing Randy for my ex-wife for the first time, and I met the mother of my son. Okay. Um, we wound up getting an apartment together. We took a trip out to Arizona for one of her family's reunions. It was her grandparents' 51st anniversary. And we moved back to Colorado, and her parents were adamant that I had a problem with alcohol. So they highly suggested and wanted me to go to AA. So I tried to do that. But here's the thing, you know, between the house and that AA meeting, there were three or four liquor stores, right? So I would stop at two of them, or maybe even three before I got to the meeting. And on my way back home, of course, because the guy at the liquor store can't know that I'm drinking so much, I would go to the other liquor stores on my way home, and they were just absolutely perplexed. Like, how is he going to an AA meeting and he's coming back drunk? How does this work? Um,
I was more worried. It's funny you said that because I was more worried about my garbage man, my recycle dude, seeing all the bottles
yeah,
that I that I was
yep.
recycling. Then I was worried about like my friends knowing or my neighbors, or I was just more worried about my recycling dude.
Hmm.
So that's funny that you said
Absolutely.
it. So anyway, sorry to
Absolutely.
interrupt.
So no, you're okay. And just like a lot of us, it's that vicious cycle. There was all kinds of legal trouble, all kinds of stuff. You know, I'm kind of I didn't think I was high up there, but normal people don't get arrested for domestic violence. Normal people typically don't get multiple DUIs. Normal people, they just don't do that stuff. Um, when I really try getting my stuff together by myself, it did not work. I would wake up in the morning and say, today's the day I'm not going to drink and I'm going to get my shit together, right? So I'd be like, yeah, I got this. So I'd wake up, I would clean my apartment, I would clean the house, I would clean my truck. I'd say, yeah, I'm going to have a really fancy dinner. I'm going to barbecue a steak or something. And lo and behold, I was just drunk in a really clean house or apartment at the end of the night, you know? So, and I was absolutely baffled. I was absolutely baffled at why this kept happening. And then I finally remembered at one point, what about AA? You know, uh, so when I first came into the program willingly, uh, I was 26 or I was yeah, I was 26 or I was 27. you know, uh, I had called the AA hotline in Colorado Springs, and I had said, yeah, I need a meeting. I'm an alcoholic and this and that, and I'm drinking too much. And the guy told me, yeah, there's an 11 o'clock late night meeting starting here, and it's 10:30. You can make it. And I said, where's it at? And he's like, well, it's right off Academy Boulevard. So I get in my
And
truck, get in my
this was in Colorado, right?
Yes, this was in
Okay.
Colorado Springs. So
Okay.
I hop in my truck and I'm driving up and down Academy Boulevard, drunk as hell. And I had the meeting address put in my map and I couldn't find it. Right. So I just go back home and I just pass out. So I go into this meeting the very next day, and the first thing that I realize is it's in a strip mall. And this is, it's in a strip mall, and I was so drunk I couldn't see the big circle and triangle that was plastered into the window of the strip mall. I couldn't see it. I didn't realize, like, anyway, so I introduced myself as a newcomer in this meeting, and after that meeting, this guy walks up to me. His name is Scott. He walks up to me and he sticks out his hand, and he's all smiling and laughing, and I just look at him and I'm like, dude, what the fuck is your problem, bro? And he just starts laughing, and I'm all like, no, dude, like I need help. You don't understand. Like I have problems. Like I can, I'm barely making it to work. I'm sleeping under a pool table at my brother-in-law's house. I can't stop drinking. I have zero fucking money, dude. I barely have a relationship with my kids. I got real problems. So enter me into the world of AA, right? So as time was progressing on, I was trying to do this whole sober and recovery thing, and it just seems to me that it wasn't working, you know, and I couldn't figure out why, right? So I eventually won one of my bottoms. Well, I wouldn't even call it a bottom. It's a jumping off point, right? And it talks about it in our big book. It was that point where I couldn't see my life without alcohol or without alcohol, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I was going through I was just about to get my third divorce finalized with my wonderful ex-wife. And I was living with one of my friends, Rudy. Um, I woke up. I remember this day very vividly. There was a lot of heavy drinking involved. I go upstairs. We were living in a townhouse. I go upstairs to go to bed for the night. I go to bed and I wake up around, it was like 1:30, 1:40 in the morning, and my room was so chock full of smoke that I couldn't see my TV that was on, that was less than 10 feet away from my bed.
Mm.
So I immediately knew that there was a fire somewhere. Part of my story is, I've always taken a lot of pride in my work, and there have been some points where I have been very egotistical about it, but the program has taught me to be humble now, right? I was a wildland hotshot firefighter for 6.5 years. I've always worked in some kind of construction, union iron worker, road construction, like very incredibly roughneck work, right? Where if you don't drink or you don't do drugs, like you're the outcast, right? So that had that played a huge part in my drinking and my other addictions, right? So I immediately knew there was a fire. What had happened was the neighbor had a 5-gallon bucket outside of his house, and he threw a cigarette butt in it, and it lit all the other cigarette butts on fire. The plastic bucket melted. It caught the privacy fence on fire. It went under our porch, and the fire shot up the wall into my window. So by the time I woke up, the backside of the house was already engulfed in flames, right? So after that fire, my dad was living right up the street from us in Colorado Springs. So I had the nerve to ask my dad if I could go and stay with him for a while. So, and oh fucking boy. So you want to talk about a whirlwind? At this point, so I was working in road construction. I got laid off during the winter, and this was this fire was in September, so my layoff time was coming up. So I would get laid off during the winter and I would get job attached unemployment, which means I don't have to look for a job during the winter, right? But I still get my unemployment, right? So I'm living with my dad and we're both drinking like it is absolutely nobody's business, right? Um, my jumping off point was I came to on it was a Monday morning or it might have been a Tuesday. I come to and I have absolutely no recollection from about Friday, right? Um, at this point, I had gotten my Christmas bonus from my company. I come to and I look around my room. All my money is gone. My bank account is empty. There's substances known and unknown scattered around my room. There's empty bottles everywhere, just the works, you know. And there was a hole in the air mattress that I was sleeping on too. So the only reason why I truly woke up is because I was sleeping on the floor, essentially, right?
Mm.
So I walked downstairs of the townhouse, and this is about 5:30 in the morning, and my dad is awake, and he's sitting in his recliner chair in the living room and he is having a full blown conversation with somebody who is not there, right? So I look at him and something in my mind tells me, is this who you were going to be? And the answer to that question, it legitimately scared me because the answer to that question was I always swore that I'm never going to be like my dad. I'm never going to be like my mom. I'm not going to ever do what they did. But the harsh reality was I am exactly like them to a T. The only difference is I did it bigger, better, and faster than either of them ever did, right?
Mm.
So I was well within the throes of my alcoholism and my addiction way before my mother or father ever were, right?
Mm.
So
That's a
I
hard,
made a
that's
call.
a hard pill to swallow.
It is. And you know, when we can actually confront those kinds of things and actually swallow those pills or whatever. You know, some people call them spiritual experiences, other people call them aha moments, other people call them, you know, miracle moments. You know, for me, it was more of it was more of a I know what I have to do to get away from this moment, right? So
Sounds like a moment of clarity, actually.
it was right, a moment of clarity, right?
Yep.
So I made one phone call to one of my friends, Daniel, who was in the program, and he said, you know, I talked to him for about 5 minutes, and he said, okay, you know, I'm going to get you some help. So a couple minutes later, uh, he calls me back, and he's like, hey, call this guy named Joey, and I said, okay. So I called Joey, and he owned a sober living house, right? So I talked to Joey and he's like, yeah, are you going to be able to come up today after this like hour long conversation? And I'm all like, dude, I just told you like I'm still drunk. Like I have two DUIs. Like I am not going anywhere today. So I went back inside, I took a shot or two, and I locked myself in my room for the next 18 hours. And I just tried to sleep the best I could. The next day, I went into my third sober living house, right?
Mhm.
So the difference between this time and the prior two times going into sober living was at this point, I had already lost 90% of my things in the house fire, materialistic things. I have I had to give up a lot of things to get into the sober living. I gave up my truck. I had to be outside. I had to get another job or at least look for one or pretend to. There were just a lot of things I had to give up to go into the sober living, and I did it, right?
Mhm.
So once again, I called my old sponsor, Scott. Same dude who walked up to me, still smiling and introduced himself to me. I called him and he said he was, willing to work with me again, right? And mind you, Scott was always there for me in and out of jail, my divorces. When I was when I was locked up, he would send me emails, we would talk back and forth. He's always been there, right? So I go into the sober living and I'm doing the thing, right? So this sober living house was it wasn't a good fit for me. So I was there for a week and I moved over into another sober living. So and this, my fourth sober living house, this is where I started to really find myself because I was starting to work a program, right, of some sorts. It wasn't an honest program, but I was working some kind of program, right? So I started a couple of meetings in this sober house, all kinds of things, right? So it was St. Patrick's Day in 2000. I think it was 2000, yeah, 2018. No, 2019. So it was St. Patrick's Day 2019. Okay. So I go to my nightly meeting at Walk the Talk, the first meeting that I ever went to willingly when I called Intergroup and I couldn't find it. I was going back to that meeting religiously. And I finish a reading and we all go around the room and introduce ourselves. And I heard somebody say, "Hi, my name's Willow. I'm an alcoholic." And I look up and I look at Willow and I could see the green in her eyes from across the room. Now, I don't suggest this to a lot of people, right? I can see the green in her eyes from across the room. She had on this super lime green, bright spider jacket, and she was sitting crisscross applesauce in a chair up against the wall next to the door, right? And in my mind, I just go, "That's her. That's her," right? So the very next day, I stayed all day at the Sunday meetings at Walk the Talk. There was a very big meeting at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then at 1 o'clock, there was a beginners meeting. There was another meeting at 3 o'clock. And by the 4 o'clock meeting, 4 p.m. meeting on this St. Patrick's Day, Willow just grabs my phone and she puts her phone number in there and she says, "You should call me or text me," right? So ever since that day, things have they took off with us, right? Let's just put it like that, right? Um, so in December of 2019, we moved down here to Texas, okay, to Austin from Colorado Springs. And, at this point, we are both in recovery. We're both, doing the AA thing. And she went to treatment. And, we thought everything was great and grand, right? So we get here to Austin, and I take everything that I know about AA and everything about recovery, and it goes right out the window, right? So, same thing with her, but that's her story, right? Uh, so for me,
What made you come to
you know,
Austin?
work
Oh,
did.
okay. Okay.
she works at Costco in July. This coming up July, it will be 19 years at Costco for her. And this
Wow.
November, it will be 4 years at Costco for me. So, and that's a huge deal. Like, dude, I've been working at the same place for 4 years. Like, holy shit, you know?
Yeah, that's an accomplishment though. That's
It is, and we'll get to that here in a minute, right?
yeah,
So we move here to Austin and then COVID happens, right?
yeah.
Everything shuts down, right? And in my mind, I can be a social drinker and I can do this. The whole city is locked down. So I relapsed a total of 3 times when during COVID, right? So my at the end of it, my sobriety date is October 16, 2021. So I'm coming up on no 2020. I'm coming up on 5 years now. Um, my last drunk, I will never forget it. I was at home by myself and I planned the whole entire thing out. I got my bottles the day before, and Willow was going to go to work. I was going to get hammered. I was going to pass out and be sober by the time she got home and all this, right?
Mhm.
So that didn't happen. She totally knew. I could barely send her a text. I could barely make a phone call. So I asked myself, like, when did this, like, why am I doing this? Like, why is this not working? And to my innermost self, it taught this is step one, to my innermost self, I knew that it never worked. I just never would admit it to myself. Now, this is where my recovery like truly starts to come in, right? At that point, I realized that I always knew I was an alcoholic, but
Mhm.
I wouldn't admit it, right? I knew it, but I wouldn't admit it. There's a difference between knowing something and admitting it, right?
Yeah.
And I always wore my alcoholism as a badge of honor, right? And I would hide behind that badge of honor, right? I'm going to party harder than you. I'm going to drink more than you. I'm going to have a better time than you. I'm cooler than you. I'm better than you. But in all reality, I was dead inside. I was trying to cope with all of these different things and all these past traumas that I've been through, right? And I was mainly trying to run from myself, because I didn't want to admit that I was an alcoholic, right? But I did. I had to, So at
Let
this,
me ask you, let me stop you for a second because did you ever feel, because you obviously had a whole bunch of family stuff that obviously affected you, but when you were and so there was that, but when you were drinking and using and all that kind of stuff, did you ever feel as a young person also pressured to drink and use as well by other
no,
young
because
by
no,
other
because I was no, because I was the one pressuring other people.
okay.
A
Oh,
hundred
so you were
percent, right?
all right, so
You
you were one
know,
of them.
yeah. So,
Okay.
seeking out those sordid places, seeking out that companionship,
Yeah.
and approval and acceptance, seeking all that out. And that was my way to do it. Right.
Okay.
I'm the cool kid over here. I had the booze, I had the drugs, I have all that, accept me, love me, all those things. Right.
Yeah.
But in all reality, they just wanted what I had, right?
Yeah.
And I never could accept myself, until I came into the program, right? I couldn't when I came into the program, that's when I learned how to be able to accept myself for who I was and what I was, right?
Yeah.
So after this last drunk, I went back to AA and it just didn't seem like it was working again, right? Because once again, I was hiding behind that badge and I didn't want to admit it, right? So I spent 18 months dry. And I'll tell you this right now, that 18 months, I was more batshit fucking crazy than I ever was drinking or using any other drug.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not fun.
Yeah, it drove me to a point of suicide. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this. The night that I tried to attempt suicide, Will and I, we were sitting in the kitchen and I had my hood up and we're looking at each other from across the island because our relationship was over. We were about to split up for a while. And she just looks at me and she just says, Brendan, no matter what anyone has ever said to you or what you think, you will do great things. And in my mind, I didn't believe it. Like my mind didn't, but there was a little tiny spark somewhere inside of me that believed it and it took that and it held on to it. Right. So 3 days later, I'm in a hotel room and I'm just up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm pacing around like a fish. And at this point, I have tried absolutely anything and everything under the sun to have the life that's happy, joyous, and free. And I knew the answer. I knew that going back to AA was the last house on the block. That was my only solution, right?
Mhm.
And they say AA isn't for people who want it, it's for people who need it, right?
Mhm.
And I wanted it too, So I once again I call Intergroup and that poor lady who answered the phone, bless her heart, I blew up and I was crying, I was sobbing, I didn't know what to do. And she told me there was a meeting at the Hope Group up in Cedar Park, and I should go to the early morning meeting. So I make it into that meeting, and I was about 10 minutes late, and I was just gonna. I introduced myself as a newcomer. I shared, I'm at a point of suicide. The whole works, right?
Mhm.
So everybody gets up to circle up and pray after the meeting, and I'm gonna bolt out the door just like I always do. Um, and this chick followed me out. Still to this day, I don't know her name or who she is. She followed me outside and she said, "Brother, I love you. Why don't you stay?" And she gave me this big old hug. And next thing you know, I'm surrounded by 10, 11, 12 guys. And, you know, the fellowship carried me when I couldn't carry myself, you know. uh, from that moment forward, uh, my life, that's when it truly changed, right? Because I was more than willing to be honest with myself and another person, right? And when it came to this God thing, I had found my higher power in that little 3 day span,
Mhm.
of me being in that hotel and, you know, at my point of suicide, because my whole entire life, I always knew where there was something out there that was bigger and better than me. I just didn't know what it was or where to find it, right? So
Mhm.
after reading all these books, these spiritual books, looking into Buddhism, reading the Koran, Hinduism, Christianity, you know, the last place that I looked was within myself, that's where I found my God, my higher power, right?
Mhm.
Because in my at my core and in my heart, I have all this love, all this compassion, the forgiveness, I have all those things, And those are all attributes of God, right? So I truly believe that my God lives within me, right? So I call it the indwelling spirit, right? So God, my God has never left me. He has always been there. The problem with that was I would always expel him, right? I would always, you can never truly get rid of God. You can only expel them, right? Like go on, get out of here, right? They're always there, right? So when it comes to the program, you know, working a solid set of steps with several different sponsors, you know, getting these different perspectives on things, on why I do what I did, you know, the step work, uh, my fourth step, my fifth step, my amends, everything, the whole 9 yards, right? And the way I like to look at the steps is like this, you know, steps 1 through 6 are all about my absolute favorite thing in the world, me, right? That's it, plain and simple. Steps 1 through 6 are all about me. You know, steps 8 through 12 are all about other people in the outside world, right? You know, step 6 is that bridge of humility that brings me back to the world, right? So when when I started when I started working my program, you know, I took a very deep dive in a lot of things, you know, and like I said before, it it broke the ice for me to be able to, you know, start trauma therapy and take on that endeavor. You know, I learned a lot about myself, and you know, some of the biggest things that I've learned was a lot of the things that I've been through in my life were not my fault. You know, I was not to blame. You know, even though I did blame myself, you know, a lot of the trauma that I'd been through, other people did have a part in it, but you know, at the end of it, you know, I have to be able to forgive them as well. But first and foremost, I had to be able to forgive myself first, right? You know, and that was a huge thing because once I was able to forgive myself, once I was able to accept myself, once I was able to be honest with myself, I was able to bring that out into the world and to other people, right? You know, this is going to be very nerdy. On I watch a lot of old school cartoons on Avatar, you know, old Nickelodeon cartoon. Aang goes up to the top of a mountain to talk to a guru, and he goes up there to unlock all of his chakras, right? You know, the one of the very first things that this guru tells Aang is, you know, you must gain balance within yourself before you can bring balance to the world. You know, and that when I first heard that, it really struck with me because, you know, at the end of all this step work and all this other stuff, it's an inside job, right?
Mhm.
It is all an inside job. That's just that's just the reality of it. You know, I believe that a lot of these changes that the big book talks about, like the psychic change and you know all these other things, they're all an inside job, right? So my recovery today, it looks like a lot of service work, a lot of service work, you know, because I know what it's like to be that person, especially that young person, to be hoping and wishing and praying that somebody would just show up and tell me everything's going to be okay. This is how you can do this, right? Because nobody ever showed up for me. I wish they did, but they didn't. And you know, that's just the truth of it. But what my program gives me is it gives me the tools, just like it talks about in the big book. It gives me the tools to be able to show up and be that person.
So tell us about uh the tell us about the Young People's AA, the Texas
So,
Conference of Young People
so,
A,
all right. So,
because you're like totally involved and all that kind of stuff, and I know that you do really hard work with that. I mean, I know that you
so
put your all into it.
I found young people in AA and Alcoholics Anonymous back uh, towards the beginning of last year. And Austin, the city of Austin, had a bid that won ICIPOG, which is an international conference for young people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And somebody had made an announcement in a meeting that they were looking for people to be of service. And I immediately, my ears perked up and I said, I'm in. Like, hands down, I'm in. Because at this point in my sobriety, I knew that there had to be something more, right? So going to, don't get me wrong, like going to meetings is cool, going out to eat is cool with the fellowship and this and that. But in the back of my head, I was kind of like, is this what my life is doomed to? Like, I'm going to go to meetings and I'm going to go to pancakes at Kirby Lane and call it a day. Like, this is it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so young people in AA take on a whole new meaning to recovery for me, right? I found my home in Waipa. You know, it's a whole bunch of young people that take service, unity, and recovery as the backbone and they have fun with it, right? You know, in the big book, it says, you know, we absolutely insist on enjoying life. And that is exactly what we do. You know, there is a lot of work that goes on behind bringing conferences to cities and even attending conferences. You know, my first young people's conference was ICIPA here in Austin, and it changed my life. It changed my life. I didn't believe people when they said it would, but in so many different aspects and in so many different ways, it changed my life. You know, the fellowship, the relationships that you build, having fun in sobriety and being able to be of service to other people, you know, because I came into this program and, you know, I didn't have a purpose, right? So, what the program and what YPA has given me is it has given me a purpose in life, right? And that's to help the next alcoholic, right? And,
Well,
you know, I can,
if I can stop you there, because what I've found is a lot of young people, uh, especially when they get sober and they're new to sobriety, you know, a lot of people, a lot of young people, and not just young people, but in early sobriety, especially in the first year, you're going through like a range of emotions because you don't have that, you don't have your coping mechanism that you used to have. So you're going through these emotions the first year. And so, you know, working the steps and doing a lot of service work helps with that. And
absolutely.
so it it's it was, for me, I can only speak for myself, but for me it was very important to get involved in service work because it helped me uh, with those emotions. Because if I was involved in service work, I wasn't thinking about those things. I wasn't
Right.
I wasn't sitting somewhere and mulling about that stuff. So
Right.
I was very fortunate because I built my network early. I did what I was told to do. Fortunately, I had a lot of people around me at that time thrusting information at me and telling me what to do. And this was back in the day. But I was thrusted into service work. And I think,
Right.
today, young people, and I wish I would have gotten sober when I was younger, but I don't think the young people today realize that if they get sober young, how powerful that can be, because
Right.
they can be very powerful to other young people just by getting sober. Because it seems like it's a lot of pressure because other people are making them feel like maybe they should be drinking. But if they do get sober and other people see other friends or see them get sober, they start saying, "What are you doing? Like, why aren't you drinking?" And then they're like, "Well, I can't anymore. It's not working for me," or whatever they decide to say. It starts showing, and then other people are like, "Well, maybe I need to stop drinking." I mean, it shows.
Right. Right.
So I just
So,
wanted to say that because young people can be powerful when they get sober.
right.
So
Absolutely. Just this past weekend, I went to Tiki Paw, and our speaker on Friday night, he flew down from Golden, Colorado. He got sober at 18 years old and has stayed sober since he was 18, and he's 67 years old.
wow.
So, I have met a lot of people that have gotten sober when they are young. And when people hear young people in Alcoholics Anonymous, they automatically disqualify themselves because of age, right? So if you want to define young the way uh ICIPA, the International Conference, defines young is someone who has room to grow. And that's all of us, plain and simple. If you don't have room to grow, you're perfect. And I don't think anybody has reached that pinnacle yet. Um, so I'm going to give you a little bit of history here. And, you know, so this comes off of the Texipaw website, and it says young people's groups in Alcoholics Anonymous began appearing around 1945 in Los Angeles, Cleveland, and Philadelphia, and now they can be found all across North America, and they can be found around the world too, right? Um, in 1958, a meeting of young AAs from across the US and Canada started what is now the International Conference of Young Peoples and Alcoholics Anonymous, which is ICIPA, and it has met on an annual basis ever since. At the 1960 AA convention, Bill W. noted that the age of new members was much lower than when he and Dr. Bob had founded AA 25 years earlier. And a letter to the ICIPA dated June 15th, 1969, Bill wrote, "In recent years, I have found nothing for greater inspiration than the knowledge that AA of tomorrow will be safe and currently magnificent in the keeping of you who are the younger generation of AA today." So Bill W. recognized young people in Alcoholics Anonymous before he died, right? And it was a thing back way before the 50s, right? So when people think about young people and them getting sober and not being an alcoholic or anything like that, the big book defines it very, very, very clearly, right? And at the end of it, it's up for the individual to decide, right? You know, um, so as far as Texipaw goes, Texipaw is a Texas State Conference for Young People and Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, Texipaw is a huge part of my sobriety, and it is a huge part of my life. It's it's a pinnacle, right? It's a pillar, right? Um, this is still coming right off the the website. Texipaw was founded in 1980 for the purpose of providing a setting for an annual celebration of sobriety among young people in AA. Since its inception, a growing group of people who at first would not consider themselves as, quote, young people, end quote, has become regular attendees. The number of young people suffering from alcoholism who turn to AA for help is growing, and Texipaw helps to carry AA's message of recovery to alcoholics of all ages. This meeting provides an opportunity for young AAs from all over the state to come together and share their experience, strength, and hope as members of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA members who attend a Texipaw return home better prepared to receive young people who come to AA looking for a better way of life. So, Texipaw has been going on for a very, very long time. This year is the 45th Texipaw in Houston. To have 45 conferences held on an annual basis minus COVID, that is a huge deal, you know. Just like Ikipa has been going on for a very, very long time. And all these other states, every state in this country has some form of YPA conference or some form of YPA community, right? Some may be bigger than others, some may be smaller, but they're most definitely there, right? And the whole backbone of these YPA communities, especially in a conference structure or anything to do with these events that we're talking about, unity, service, and recovery are the three legacies of AA. They're the ultimate backbone of it all,
Right.
especially service, a lot of work goes on into these things, but it is a fulfilling work. It's being able to be of service on this kind of level brings impacts communities and entire cities in a way that is unimaginable. Some people that I have met, they still remember their first YPA conference from 45 years ago. You know, uh, that's huge, and I can't argue with that by any means. You know, uh, I have met so many people in the YPA community. I know people all across this country, and some people live abroad. You know, one of the things that I did during the last Sticky Paw is I had some people who were attending sign a soccer ball and saying where they're from, and that soccer ball is in the Hill Country Intergroup office here in Austin, and we have Japan, we have Iran, we have New Zealand, we have Australia, we have Canada, we have Mexico, we have Brazil, and people travel vast distances to go to these conferences and attend them. And the crazy thing is when you go to these conferences, you build that community, right? That unity. And as you come around, you will most likely see the same people back at these conferences, you know, and you'll see them and you'll be like, hey, I met you, I met you at CC Paw, or, I met you at Lacy Paw or something like that, and that's a unity behind it, right? And that's when we talk about developing lifelong friends in this program, you know, that's what it's talking about right
Mhm.
there. It's something that I've experienced and something that I live, and I never thought that was imaginable by any
Yes.
means.
So tell us what you're working on, because you're the chair.
Yes.
Uh,
So the city of Boston, we had it's called a bid committee for TexiPause. So these these conferences don't just fall out of the air into a city. There is a lot of work that has to go on behind getting a conference into a city. So we put together what's called a bid committee, right? So what a bid does is there is an outline of requirements that's set forth by advisory that you have to meet to be able to host this conference, right? So you got to get your hotel contracts, you got to be of service within your community, such as doing H&Is, starting meetings, carrying the message. Um, you do all kinds of stuff. You write a tentative program for this conference. You uh, you write like tentative entertainment ideas, you get your whole entire budget set up, how much everything would cost, and then the year wherever the conference is hosted that year, the whole entire bid committee goes up there. We put everything together and put it in a bid book. We go up to the conference and we present our bid. And this is a real fun part of presenting your bid. You put together what's called a bid skit. So it can be anything you want it to be. It could be a video you record, it could be a play, it could be a little skit, it can be, you all dance to a certain song and costumes. It can be anything you want it to be, creative and fun, right? So after you do your presentation and advisory goes over your bid book, they vote on whoever is going to be awarded the conference. And if you're awarded the conference, you your city is going to host the conference the next year. So, and that's where a lot of the real work truly begins. But bidding is absolutely fun. We put on events. We do have unity events between with people on the within the committee, and it's just a grand time, and once again, it's developing those relationships, right? Because in the 12 and 12 it talks about most alcoholics have trouble developing relationships, right?
mm,
That is most definitely me. And being of service in the YPAW community has given me more than those relationships that I crave, right?
mhm.
So I always have something to do. I always have somebody there, and it's just a beautiful thing. Yeah,
Well, that's the thing, is because we used to, well, I can only speak for myself again, but I used to think that, which was a lie, I know now, but alcohol used to make me courageous, or liquid courage and all this kind of stuff. And the reality was, it ultimately was slowly killing me. The bottom
absolutely,
line is that that's what it was doing. And
absolutely.
now, now that I have gotten back my life by leaving all of those things out of my life, I have been able to love myself again. And because of service work, I am uniquely qualified to help another alcoholic or addict because I'm able to be vulnerable with the shit that I've done in the past and
Absolutely.
not be ashamed and embarrassed about that stuff anymore.
Right.
And then that makes other people who may think that that stuff is embarrassing or shameful, not so shameful of that stuff because
Right.
because they're hiding it and thinking that I'm the only one that's done that, and I can't I can't talk about that stuff, you know. So,
Absolutely.
and that's the beauty of, you know, of this program. And, you know, and then, you know, alcoholism and addiction is getting rid of that stigma, and that is my personal goal, is to break down the stigma of alcoholism, addiction, and mental health and all that kind of stuff, because the more we talk about it, the less of the fear there is of that kind of stuff, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I totally agree with you 100%. And you know, I too was very embarrassed and shy and not wanting to be vulnerable with anything, especially being emotionally vulnerable with
Mhm.
other people. And because of my service work and being able to work a program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm able to do that now, you
Mhm.
know. And the bottom line is this: if there's a word for it or a phrase, it's been done before and somebody
Sure.
else has already done it, you know. So I'm not special, I'm not unique. I just need to get over myself and tell somebody, you know, because I never know who's listening at all. You know, I could say something that changes somebody's life, or they may absolutely hate me for it. That's okay. They can call their sponsor or talk to somebody about it, you know. Um, but breaking down that stigma and, you know, viewing these kinds of things as, oh, you're a bad person, or thinking you're a bad person, I can revert back to my therapy, and in my heart of hearts, I don't believe there is a such thing as a bad individual or a bad part of an individual, if that makes sense, you know, because at the end of the for me, you know, a lot of my what the program calls character defects, I call them parts. What a lot of them were survival tactics and coping mechanisms, right? I didn't, in my heart of hearts, I truly didn't, and I didn't intentionally hurt other people, or I didn't want to hurt other people or any of that. You know, I was doing what I did to protect myself. You know, I'm gonna
Sure.
love you, but I'm not gonna love you the way you want me to, or I want you to love me, or I want you to love me at a distance, you know. And being that, I compare it to me being like a scared little tiny kitten, right?
Yeah.
You know, I got a little cat and I'm exactly like her to a T. You know, she's my little baby. But breaking that stigma down is absolutely key. You know, I'm very open about my alcoholism. I'm very open about my recovery. My employer knows it. Everybody who is in my life knows about it. You know, I'm not shy. And when people want to talk about it, I talk about it. If they don't, then don't ask, don't tell, right?
Well, and not only that, but even when I've been open about some of the issues that I've been going through, it's amazing because people will come forward and even offer solutions. Um,
Absolutely.
so there's a bonus. There's a bonus for sharing some of, not to say that uh, we stay in problems, but even if you're going through something and you may share a little bit of, something of what you're going through, when you do, people offer solutions.
Right.
And saying, and by saying that, I mean, they lead you back to a solution because they've already been through that, and it helps. Um, so, uh, like you said, you never know who's listening and who has been through the same thing, and can help you. And that's why this is a we program. You know,
Absolutely.
it's, and that's why it works, you know?
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of, I was told when I came in, stick with the winners.
Right.
Well, you know, I disagree with that because if I stick with the winners, who's going to be there for that newcomer? Who's going to be there for that lost person? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Like
yeah, that's true.
I
But
I get I
go ahead.
I, I get I get sticking with the winners. And one thing I always try to remember is I better watch how I treat that newcomer because tomorrow they could be my sponsor, you know.
That's true. That's true. But
Yeah.
I have also learned a lot. Being a sponsor, I have also learned a lot from my sponsees too.
Hmm.
So I don't ever want to discount anybody, including newcomers, because I learn a lot from them too. So we all learn a lot from each other. So
Absolutely.
um, it's amazing how AA works, and
It is.
I'm very grateful.
Me too. Very much so.
So when you talk about the bid, are you talking about bid? I just want to I want to make sure I am understanding you clearly, but when you talk about the bid, are you talking about bidding for the international conference here in Austin?
No, we're bidding for TexiPod, the Texas State Conference for
Okay.
young people in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
But throughout the whole entire state of Texas, we got a lot of stuff going on in the White Paw community. Dallas Fort Worth has a bid for the international conference. San Antonio, as far as I know at this point, they're bidding for what's called Wacky Paw. It's a Western area conference for young people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that conference is huge. It covers everything west of the Mississippi, no, the Missouri River, and ECPA covers everything east of that. So that is a huge conference, right? Like, and at the end of the day, we're all just trying to bring these conferences to our cities. And while we're doing this, we're creating service work within our community for
Right.
those people. And even if we're not, even if you're not awarded the bid, or even if you are, you're just going to be able to create more service work and bring it back to your community and change more lives. That's just the bottom line, you
Right.
know. And the work always has to be done. There is always something to do, you
Right.
know. And like when I first came into service work, uh, to be quite honest, I could send a text message and I could call people. I could barely write an email, like just barely write an email, right? I had learned so much in service work. I learned how to use Google. I've learned how to use like the Google Drive. I've learned how to use spreadsheets. I've learned how to write documents. I've learned how to take, business minutes. I've learned how to run a treasury for a group. I've just learned all of these incredible things, and it didn't cost me anything except for showing up, right? That's it. And when I look at it, like some of the things that I have learned, like, dude, people pay to go to school to learn how to do these things, right?
Mhm.
And I just got to show up and be of service, and I get to learn all these things too. It's it's cool. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you get to meet a lot of cool people.
Oh,
I
oh
mean,
yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
cool people.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's
You know,
amazing.
it is very much so.
All right, Brandon. Well, it's time. I'm gonna ask you a few questions because I at the end of our podcast, uh I ask our guests 10 questions. That they're the same questions every time, but I ask our guests these questions. So, are you ready?
Okay. Would I be able to read something real quick?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So I I I started with, the first two paragraphs of a vision for you, right? And that paints a pretty grim picture that a lot of us can relate to, right?
Right.
And on the very next page, it says, "We have shown you how we have got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you." And to me, those are some incredibly powerful words because not only are they true, but it also tells me it's there for my taking. I just have to I just have to be willing, and that's absolutely key in all of this. I absolutely have to be willing. That's it.
That's right. I think
Yeah.
you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Or did I say that right? Yeah, I think I said
You
that
did.
right. I always screw stuff up. But anyway. So, okay. All right. So here we go. Okay. So, first question. What skill would you like to ultimately master and why?
Baking.
Really?
Yes. So I absolutely love baking. It's one of my passions, even though I look like a Viking with my hair all done and my long beard. But yeah, I throw down with my mixer and rolling pins in the kitchen and, bake some cookies and some pies and, whatever whatever else sounds good. I like exploring those kinds of things, and it makes me feel like I'm free, like that creative side can come out. So baking 100%.
Cool. That's a cool answer. All right. Okay. What has been the highlight of your life thus far and why?
The highlight of my life, I guess my go-to answer would be getting sober and staying sober, but I don't feel that's right. I would have to say the highlight of my life is the people that are in my life now. Um, I have a vast array of people that are in my life now that I never thought would be there because I never thought I would be able to have a true friendship or a relationship with anybody, right? You
Mhm.
know, coming from the past that I had, having, the abandonment issues and everything, I never saw that possible. And now, if I ever need anything, there is always somebody there. And if I don't know how to do something or I don't know what to do, I probably know somebody that does.
That's a good answer, but that makes sense though. But you do realize that you did the work for that, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, what risk have you not taken that you would still like to take, and why haven't you?
A risk that I would like to take. Um, Going into a line of work where I help people more along the lines of what I do in my service work. Um, and the reason why I haven't is this is going to sound so bad, but the financial aspect of it. I work at Costco right now, and I get paid very well for what I do, and the benefits are astronomical. Um, so making that blind leap of faith and knowing everything would be okay and work out is absolutely terrifying. So that's why I haven't done it.
Oh, well, I can understand. I get it. Okay. Do you have any nick or pet names? And what are they?
So Willow calls me Fuzzy Bear and Fuzzy Fish. So um Fuzzy Fish, I don't even remember where that came from, but Fuzzy Bear, I love bears. I love all animals and all critters, but I really do like bears, and I'm a fuzzy guy. So I mean, I've always been fuzzy. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Next question. What person, living, dead, or a character, do you most relate to and why?
So that would be my cat, Tiny Kitten. So we named her Bugsy because when we got her, she was so small she could fit in the palm of my hand, and her head was so small that it looked like her eyes were gonna pop out of her head, and she looked like a bug, right? So we found her on Craigslist from this crazy cat lady, and we get to this crazy cat lady's house, and she's in a bird cage. Okay. Tiny Kitten is in a bird cage and she is absolutely terrified. It took me about a good hour to coax her out of this bird cage, right? So ever since we brought her home, she is always incredibly skittish,
Hmm.
like, but she wants you to love her, right?
Hmm.
You make a loud noise, she's gone. You pet her wrong, she's gone. You know, so at the end of it, we got her a couple years ago, and as the years have progressed, just like my sobriety, my recovery have progressed, she now lets me pick her up. She now lets me love on her. she's now incredibly playful. And it was the growth process of seeing that come out in her, because at the end of it, I was just this scared little tiny cat. Um, yeah, my little tiny cat, tiny kitten.
Oh, that's sweet. Okay, so next question. Who do you admire and why?
I admire quite a few people. The this is that's a pretty damn tough question. The first person that comes to my head, and this is going to be pretty damn twisted. Jim Morrison comes to my head.
Well,
Uh,
I mean, that's a decent answer.
so I do like Jim Morrison, and I used to idolize him at one point. I but the reason why I admire him is he is insanely creative and he is very poetic, but he is very intelligent as well. His IQ was pretty up there. He was almost up there with Einstein.
Mhm.
But once again, you know, alcoholism and addiction ruled his life, and that was, you know, probably had to do with his ultimate demise. You know, I think that he felt the way a lot of us do, but he didn't know how to articulate it.
Mhm. Yep.
So yeah, yeah.
All right. What has been your biggest mistake or regret and why? And I follow that up with it, it it really ultimately wouldn't be a mistake or regret because ultimately it would have been a learning experience because you would have learned from it. So, but anyway,
I honestly, I I can wholeheartedly say this. I don't have any regrets to be honest, because everything that I have done and everything that I have been through has made me who I am today. And it's just a part of my story now. You
right.
know, I've made quite a few mistakes, and if I'm being very honest with myself and other people, marrying the same woman and divorcing her three times, like that was absolutely insane. I had a daughter with her, and with her being the way she is, I wish I would have never married her that third time, you know. So that was a huge mistake. I shouldn't have done that.
Well, like I said, we learn from our mistakes, and
Yeah,
and as long as we learn from them and we don't do them again. Um,
yeah.
Obviously, you learn from it. So, okay. So, next question: what is your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
I knew that.
I mean,
I knew the answer to that one.
yeah, it's so versatile. I mean, you could,
I
depending on
know.
how you say it, you know what I'm saying? It's just so versatile. I loved it, you know?
Yeah, I know. Dude, I can twist that word into a whole bunch of stuff. I can.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah,
You
me
know,
too.
it just flows, and I can make it into so much.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so my next question is not, I know I don't have to say this, but my next question is not racially motivated or anything like that. I just like to know stuff like this because it helps me, uh it helps us to unify everybody so that everybody knows that alcoholism comes from every facet of uh every type of place. So anyway, do you know, so what is your ethnicity or your heritage? Do you know what your heritage is? Like, are you Irish or, you know,
I'm
Norwegian or whatever?
I am Irish, Scotch Irish and French. And I do want to, me and Will, we want to do one of those ancestry DNA tests to kind of nail that down. I've heard stories about my family. Um, but yeah, definitely, European for sure. I do know my family's forefathers came over here when the United States was first getting established during the colonial period. And my family's forefather, George Pinckney, signed the Declaration of Independence.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. Very
yeah.
cool. Very cool. All right, last question. What would you hope your higher power or God or the universe would say to you when you pass on or transition or die or whatever?
So I've thought about this before. One of my friends, Micah, he is a death doula, and he does what's called a living funeral ceremony. And I partook in one of them.
Ooh,
And during
that's
this
cool.
and during the ceremony, you you write your last goodbye. Uh, they put you in a very deep meditative state with no substances. So it's a very, very deep meditative state. And then they come around and they put a shroud over you. And it is, it is quite interesting, you know. Um, you know, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through the program and everything was, the pain is mandatory and the suffering is optional, you know, and that took a while for me to learn, but I would hope they would say you don't have to hurt anymore.
Nice. Very nice. Well, Brandon, I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to talk to us, me and us, and all that kind of stuff, and share your story because I'm sure it probably some of it resonated with me, and uh, some of your story resonated with me. Of course, your recovery resonated with me, and I'm glad our paths have crossed, and especially with the service work that you do. I'm very grateful for the service work that you do, especially with young people. And and I'm glad you took the time to talk today. So thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome, and thank you for having me, and thank you for thinking of me.
Oh, you're welcome. not a problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you, everybody. And stay tuned for the next episode. And thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Holly.
Thank you.